talking. And good. Once I stop, we're going to have a presentation first from Susquehanna and then from Brooklyn, maybe 2 minutes. Just quickly say the major changes in your proposal. And I'm going to put the links in chat so people can go read the changes. We don't have to talk about a lot. And then people can start asking questions, and Richard will handle it. Okay, I'm stopping. And so, Richard, I'm sorry, you should start taking over, please.
Well, okay. We're really going to start with Susquehanna, with Patty describing the changes made. So go ahead, Patty.
Okay, so the goal of the regeneration is for the AEU to reimagine itself and engage the movement in organizational development experiences, including research, analysis, self-awareness, and group solidarity building, cultural analysis, and other activities aimed at building a sustainable and resilient organization. And you note here that we're not talking 4 months, we're talking 12 months of planning together. We're looking at reprioritizing, not pausing. Our teams and delegates will be working side by side with an OD and the board to explore and reimagine our future. There will be a quarterly board meetings and pre-board meetings in which we'll discuss and synthesize while building stronger relationships. There is no executive team. And, oh yes, so we also, the New York Post Office box or the NYSEC mailing address, we can do either, and we can give the office back to NYSEC and organize and digitize our archives, create that as a project, and maybe use universities and expanding the knowledge of ethical cultures.
So what actually is the change?
Those are changes. Those are changes, the major changes to our scenario. Okay, I guess I can add to that. We will create this future for our group, our organization, and then vote at the assembly in 2024 for, you know, our way forward.
Okay. So let's do the other presentation by Brooklyn, and then we'll open it up for questions. And those questions will be unlimited. They can be to anyone or even thrown out to the table. So go ahead, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Let me try to share my screen. Okay, can folks see my screen?
No.
We don't see the, oh, there we go.
There we go.
There we
It's
go.
not very
Now can you see?
clear.
It's not very, okay,
It's very, very small print.
all right. Let me do Control plus here, see if that helps. That's not helping. Well, I mean, I can just go ahead and mention the main points. As Carolyn said, you can go ahead and connect to the chat and get to the link of the proposal. But basically, this is to go ahead and address the concern that we weren't specific enough what would happen in the 4 months that we're talking about between the July 29th assembly and the final assembly on December 16th. So basically, we're saying within 1 week, the AEU executive group, president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary would appoint consensus task force coordinators. If the entire board can meet and make the appointment, all the better. I think 2 coordinators to start would be a good idea. And then the coordinators would appoint 1 advocate per proposal, plus 3 other members to the task force besides themselves. So you'd have a total of 11 people. And then we'd start the hard work of trying to go ahead and reconcile all the different ideas that exist in all the different proposals. So we'd use the President's Council comparison spreadsheet as the basis for that, all the good work done by Trang. And then the areas of scenario proposal disagreement be listed. Those would be Organizational development consultant or no consultant? What to do about apportionment? Should we have an executive director or no executive director? Should we have grant-based or operational funding? What about AEU board representation? How's that supposed to work? Should there be decentralization of AEU services to societies, or should continue on a centralized basis? What about articulating the key AEU mission and values? Potentially, there are going to be some other issues that would have to get worked out, but you get the basic idea here. Basically, the task force members would spend. The task force members would spend September to mid-October answering questions, identifying areas of consensus. Areas lacking consensus would have extra review and unpacking. The President's Council and the AEU Board would be asked to weigh in on unresolved issues, and then completely unresolved issues. Let's say there's a unresolved issue, who knows, on grants or on service decentralization, those would be listed as resolutions to the Assembly to decide, not bundled proposals, but actual discrete unresolved issues. And then from mid-October to mid-November, the areas with consensus become the basis of a consensus proposal written by the coordinators, and the consensus proposal and any unresolved issues would be sent to the delegates on November 15th. And then the consensus proposal and any unresolved issues would be voted on at the second assembly on December 16th. So that's the basic concept, and very explicit and very time specific, and very specific with regard to representation, to make sure that all proposal advocates are represented, and that there's also involvement of the AEU board and input of the President's Council. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. All right, so we have a couple of people who started to pose some questions, and let's go down the line. Hank, do you have your hand up or for a question now?
I didn't, but I will. Take
But
it.
you have your hand up, so if you don't intend to have your hand up,
I'm
then please
sorry.
take it down. But if you do have a question, go ahead and pose it.
I have a question to Tom as to what happens financially during the period before December. Do we request apportionments? Do we pay the rent for the office? Do we keep the position?
No, I get it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the fairest thing to do within the short term is for the 3 months of the AEU fiscal year. Keep in mind, the AEU fiscal year starts October 1st, even though the assembly meeting's on July 29th. So, you know, the July 29th is the August 1st, whatever, is the start of the remaining part of the AEU fiscal year. But for October, November, and then part of December, the existing the AEU budget would be extended for that particular that period of time. And we'd also go ahead and work within the overall guideline established by the Finance Committee that we certainly wouldn't want to go ahead and exceed the $275,000 cap that was provided. But I think, yeah, we're talking about 2.5 months of continuity of the existing budget.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Stan Horowitz, what society are you with, Stan?
Oh.
Dan, are you with us? All right, well, while we're waiting for Stan, Lee has a question. Go ahead, Lee. You're from Austin, right?
I am from Austin. Thank you. 3 questions. Have you allowed for an OD person or not?
You're directing this to whom?
Tom.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah, there's an open question now as to whether or not there should be an OD person. There are several proposals that say, yeah, great, let's plunge into it. The Bergen proposal says, no, that Kurt has been an OD person. We don't need an OD person. We've got those capability ourselves. That's not the kind of expertise we need. So that's one of the issues that has to be hammered out.
Got it.
So-
And the restorative justice piece of it, that as well needs to be discussed, or is that not part of it for you?
Yeah, we got clarification about the scope and purpose of restorative justice in terms of dealing with specific injustices. And I think, Carolyn, you had a good quote about the intentionality of restorative justice, if you want to comment on that. But we certainly want to have a parallel process whereby members can go ahead and inform the more central process for issue resolution. But the member-based process would not be restorative justice. However, it would be collaborative, and there would be communication between the member process and the central process, so that there can be more participation in this.
And do I understand you to say that you would be closing your office, the AEU office? Or-
Not in that 2.5 month period. If that's one of the identified issues. Do you close the
Okay.
office? Do you not close the office? That would be discussed. And if it's decided at the end that that's a consensus, hey, let's go ahead and close the office, that would be ratified at the December 16th second board meeting, and then you move on from there.
Got it. So my understanding right now is really you're completely wide open as to what your decisions are. You just want the time to discuss all of the options.
Yeah, and compare them and have this be a consensus-based, honest, thorough debate. We have a lot of choices ahead of us. There are a lot of things that have been bundled together. We want to disaggregate that and use this time productively so that the delegates can make a good informed choice and not.
Great. Thank you.
And
Thank
you-
you,
and
Tom.
one more thing, one more quick
We
thing.
want to move on.
You would not be eliminating the executive team.
No.
But so there, if in the consensus process, people want to talk about changes to the AEU structure, AEU representation, AEU voting, okay, great, raise it. But
Got
no,
it.
we're not talking about making any changes until people have hassled this stuff out.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure,
All right,
thank you.
Lee. Sonia from Washington.
Hi. Yeah, I have
Hi.
a question for Kurt Collier about the proposal from Bergen.
Mhm.
And I know this has been asked in a previous session, or a similar question was asked, but I didn't really understand it, or I didn't really understand the answer. So there is some money in the budget for, and I realize this isn't a budget meeting, but there's some money in the budget for these quarterly all society trainings and for the National Ethical Action Project. And I am a little bit unclear about sort of what this money actually goes to pay for. And I'm hoping that could be clarified.
Sure. Can I share my screen and kind of just talk about that real quick?
I am not the host.
The screen is shareable, Kurt.
Okay. I mean, part of what we're trying to say is to remind people once again, that our focus is on rebuilding the strength of the societies first, because so many of the societies are in dire financial need. We just need to remember that we created the AEU as an auxiliary organization to help the societies, but it doesn't have the capacity to do that. And right now we need to be strengthening the societies. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we've had all these, this is just within 2 weeks, all of these programs that have been funded through grants and opportunities for us to go out and do more work with the youth and to really to diversify our outreach more so, I think, than any other societies have been capable of doing that. And part of what we're trying to do is to say that we need to make sure that societies have the strength and ability to do that. So our plan was those who want to come into this program, we would provide training for you, not for the AEU. The program, the training should go for us, because I think the focus we're saying here is we're saying, how can we rebuild the AEU when we have so many societies that are in dire need? We had just another society recently shrink itself down and let go of its leaders and things like that. And a lot of you are in a deficit problem. And so we're trying to say, okay, how do we rescue the AEU when we really need is a training for all of us? So we would decenter the AEU, spend that money, that apportionment money that you mentioned, Sonia, on training for us. It goes to us to provide our own training and all the things that how it also allows us to provide grants, grant training, grant writing and training, all the things that we do here. I just showed within 2 weeks of the types of slides programs that we have. And so it's, you know, are your giving levels where they should be? Are you adequately staffed or understaffed? Are you compensating your staff effect? Are you meeting your developmental milestones? Do you have 6 months in reserves? I'm sure none of us can say that. Have you done a reserve study on your building? What are your value propositions people can give? So what we want to do is to do stress tests and provide all of the training for the societies. We're spending a lot of energy here just talking about how do we prop up the AU, which has limped along since I've been in the movement, what, 20 something years? It's limped along. And now we have several societies who are also in dire need. So we should be focusing on how do we take this training money so that apportionment money we would pay in would go to fly y'all to some central location like New York. We would provide workshops on a quarterly basis so that we can do this kind of stuff. We would do your society stress test. We would teach you grant writing. We would provide you with micro grants to get you started. And that's all coming out of the money that we're already paying in. So rather than give that money to the AU like we've been doing, I mean, we've given, you know, several $100,000 in the last 10 years. Collectively, we've given $1 million in 5 years to the AU. Imagine if we had had that money sinking it back into the societies. So in a word, what we're saying, Sonia, is we take the money and we use it to train each other. Does that answer your question? And that's why if you look at the budget, you'll see those 4 line items. One, you know, there's the 4 different line items that we presented, which is the national training, a national social action project, a grant writing project, and micro grants to societies.
Yeah, I appreciate your explanation, and it's a really interesting proposal. One further clarification about it. Does any of that money go to like paying individual people to provide the training or to provide administrative support for the project?
The only thing is if we go with the National Ethical Action Project, which has yet to be chosen, my executive director is pushing us, sorry to knock my coffee over. Executive director is pushing us really hard to do what now other congregations are doing in buying up debt, especially health education, health debt or education debt on pennies of the dollar and then forgiving that debt. I mean, that could be a big giant project that we could all buy into locally. So yeah, it would be, some of this would have on expertise. Some of this is stuff that I'm already doing, right? So here at the Bergen Society. So the idea is if one society has already got a great project going, let's pay that society's persons who are running this to help do this for the entire network. So we would choose things that we would look around, and each year we would choose new projects that you're already doing. I'm already teaching grant writing workshops like mad to lots of different groups. I can extend that easily to all of you as well.
So
for
the real
each
question, I
project-
think that the last thing that Sonia asked is about administrative costs. Where is this going to be administered from? Where is the central
there-
focus? Don't we need a central network to organize this?
Yeah, there's still a board. We're going to expand the board so that each society has a representative because they're training to do there. We show on the budget, there's already plenty of money existing for the board to continue to operate as it did. We would just have an expanded board. We need one representative from each society at the board, which is a central piece for that. And then the board would help direct this in coalition with the societies. This is a congregational polity. So we have programs already existing within our congregations that we can amplify. So
All
it
right,
would
we
be
have a
direct-
lot of, we're gonna have to move on because we have a
Yeah.
lot of people or questions now. All
Okay.
right, so I have Anya and then Sue.
Hi.
Anya, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. Kurt, you mentioned an executive director. Who is that?
There is no executive director, and we're not asking for an executive director.
No, I meant you were referring to something about an executive director existing. I don't know if that was Bergen. I was just unclear about what you were referring to there.
No, there's no need for the AU to have an executive director at this time and not for the next 3 years. After that
But you
point,
said, you
once,
said your executive director is pushing you to do a national, who is that?
oh,
person?
excuse me, not our executive director. I meant our president. Our past president has now pushing this is our society to do that. Well, that's a project that he's willing to take on. He's willing to train other people because we would network with these existing congregations that are already doing that, who are buying up people's medical debt on pennies on the dollar and education debts that's already turned into junk, and then forgiving those things, which is something that societies could do.
Right,
It would
right.
cost us very little money.
Okay.
But that's a
All right.
program that he's.
All right, you were
Sure,
talking about
sure.
the executive, if
Thank
there
you.
was an executive director in
I-
this scheme.
Yeah,
I
it's
had
a
a-
president.
I actually had a question, clarifying question for Tom. Tom, I thought the last time we connected over the proposals that there was some talk about restorative practices. So I just want to be clear that is not part of the plan anymore, or can you
Yeah.
provide some clarity around that?
Sure. We want to provide a vehicle for members to have input into this process. But the question is whether restorative justice itself is the proper methodology. And I don't have the quote in hand, but Carolyn, I think you shared a definition about restorative justice and the target population for that was definitive in this area. Would you mind doing so again? Sorry to put you on the spot
I'm
here.
not sure I have exactly what you want, but I do know that when we discussed it last time, the interim executive director was very clear in saying we really need people who are already skilled and trained in handling these kinds of circles. So we may not yet be at that point where it would be effective. And she can speak for herself, but I believe that she also talked about the emphasis of RJ was primarily when we were dealing with harm. And we may have a slightly different focus in these. That's just taking on Rachel's advice from last time.
Yeah, it was the focus on harm, and then it was the focus on justice from at least I guess from roots in the criminal justice arena,
okay.
and then transforming the criminal justice system. So it wasn't obvious that restorative justice would be the right mechanism for us to use. But if the task force got together and said, hey, really on reflection, restorative justice is the right mechanism, for pursuing that, Brooklyn would have no objection to that. And we're getting into some nuances about collaborative mechanisms that exceed my specific knowledge in that area, and I would defer to people with greater expertise in this area.
Okay, I guess the way that you described it makes it sound like no harm has happened in the AEU, so I'm really pretty confused about that and why you would backtrack on it. But okay, if that's not part of the plan, it's not.
It's just a question of methodology, I think. It's a question of
it's a-
choosing methodology or perhaps mediation for getting our community together.
Right, and I'm not suggesting there hasn't been harm at the AU level over time, but as for this particular process and comparing these the particular options, I think so far we're at the point of no harm, no foul, and then we kind of go forward from from what's
That's
been
really
put out there.
interesting that you assess it that way, Tom. But thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
thank you, Anya. Sue, and then Abby will take on.
All right, my question is a general question, more of a clarification. We talked to.
Is this directed to anyone in particular?
No, it's not. It's
Okay.
probably directed maybe to you or people on the board or that serve. The question is, what happened? It's my understanding that there was some archival work done. And what is the status of our current archives? What has been done? What hasn't been done? How much more work has to be done? That's the now. So
Well, I could say a little bit about what I know, because the AEU is located in the New York Society. There's been pretty much a merger of a lot of the archives, so they're in cabinets. There was a time and an effort to digitize them, but the costs of that turned out to be so prohibitive that there wasn't a lot of advance progress on that. There was a lot of work to put records in order. We had a number of volunteers come to the AEU office and put on their cotton gloves and catalog them. We built new cabinets in some conference rooms to house it. So they're basically in some medium order. There's still a lot of things that have not been classified. There's also enough room in the basement with many boxes. So they're being kept as best they can. There's been no final definitive plan for the archives, but basically they're to the extent we
How
have
many,
them.
how
it
many
might be-
years do we have to go? Do you know
Well, it
approximately?
depends on what our goal is. If it's a question of digitizing, we'd need some nice grants for that. We've had estimates, in the 6 figures about what the cost would be to digitize.
Right, thank you.
Sue,
Sue.
Sue, I just wanted to say one thing, which is, in my experience, digitizing archives, you usually team up with a university. A Columbia, of course, would be ideal, and they pay the digitizing costs. They also then own the original documents. But it also creates an opportunity for people far and wide all over the world who can then access those digitized documents. And also you can have programming throughout the year.
I totally agree with you on this. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. And the office is, when I was there, it was pretty much of a wreck, and I'm not sure how far it's come.
Yeah, that's what I expected, and thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, the archives are not in the AAU office. They're in other spaces in the building. Abby, please.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a question for Tom. What's the vision of what happens if consensus can't be reached?
Right. So what we had is the methodology there is there probably is going to be consensus reached in a number of the different areas where we have disagreement. But let's say we don't have consensus on some number of topics. Let's just say it's grants or what have you. Those would go ahead and remain as individual issues for consideration at the second assembly. So I figured what made the most sense is if after an earnest effort, the task force is unable to go ahead and resolve something, you go ahead and refer that back to the AEU board with the consultation of the President's Council, see if they can somehow help to break the logjam. If that's not successful, then it would become a discrete issue for consideration at the second assembly. So that's the idea. But we're not assuming that this is going to be a perfect process. We hope that we can go ahead and achieve consensus, but we think that we got to make an effort to try to do that. We have not actually had mechanisms to get to that point. Actually, this particular scenario discussed is something an effort in that regard, but we have to have closure in each of these different issue areas.
All right, thank you, Tom. Abby, is there a follow-up question or?
No follow-up.
Thank you, Abby. Joanna Brandt? What
Yeah.
society are you from, Joanna?
Baltimore Ethical Society.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a comment question that I'm going to try to concatenate my question for Bergen and for Brooklyn in one. So using an analogy, when you build the building, you need to build a deep foundation before you build the building. So it's the unseen part first before the seen part. So I feel like in both of your programs, you have good ideas, and Bergen has a lot to be proud of. And Tom, I really agree with your intent that we want consensus. But I think in both cases, you're going forward before going backward. Back was the wrong way to say it. But before building the foundation, you're trying to build the building. That's a better analogy, going back to that same one. So what I want to say is by approving the regeneration plan, all of the issues that you want to talk about can be addressed. This is more to Tom at this point, because you're starting with the plans that we have and saying, let's work with those plans and see if we can bring them all together, when the idea of the regeneration plan is to go broad rather than narrow and see what everybody wants, not just starting with what exists now and working with the people that are already like on the board or whatever, but getting all of the societies involved and having everybody give input. So I think that your intent is good and I appreciate it, but I think you're putting the cart before the horse. And the same way with Bergen, I think your proposal should be looked at in light of a system-wide appraisal of our priorities and values as laid out in the regeneration plan. Rather than go right into the wonderful ideas that you have to offer, we want to evaluate it in the context of diversity, inclusion, and community building. So I think the regeneration plan offers a container from which all these other ideas can be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Any comment, Tom or Kurt?
Kurt, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason why we built the most diverse congregation. I mean, we are the people that created the accountability circle, trained a lot of you in that, and put that on that the AU highlight. We've been running that for years. We have the longest running Spanish language speaking program, 20 years. I'm sorry, 10 years. We have the longest running women's training program and replacement. We have the Sanctuary Coalition of we run for bringing in refugees. We've run that for years. We have the diverse, the program that we created to create the diversity, in apartments that we've done this. We have done all of this work. We've already done the foundations, and the foundation is that we've been able to build completely on that. The reason why the society brought me in is because my focus is on social innovation, but they were already doing that before I came in the door. That's why it was a good marriage between the two. So we just have to realize that so many of the societies are limping along. Many of you can't even afford a full-time leader anymore. You can't afford a full-time Sunday school director. You can't hire a full-time administrator. We can't either. And you just got to do the math. If you do the math, you realize that you cannot exist on donations alone. That model is no longer sustainable, according to the Barna Institute. And many new church advocates are saying, listen, we need to go in there and focus on social innovation and grant writing. The AU is too tiny. It's not tied to the local jobs. I do grant writing all the time. We just got another $5,000 grant for the Martin Luther King Committee here in town. The first time they ever got a grant, I helped them write that grant, their first ever grant, because they were too small. You can't, only the societies can do this work collectively together. So we need to focus on building our foundations. I totally agree with that. The foundation of a congregational polity is the congregations. It's not the AU. We are not Presbyterians, using a presbytery. We're not an episcopacy. We're not a papacy. We're a congregational polity. So if the societies are weak, the whole foundation falls apart. And that's what we've seen it again and again.
All right, we're gonna have to move on.
Yeah,
Laura.
Richard, can I?
Tom, you want?
Just comment on that. So that was you, Joanna, right? My screen froze briefly. I think the thing to recognize about this is if the only proposal that was out there was the reorganization proposal, then Brooklyn would wholeheartedly support it. But that's not the case. We've got 5 or 6, depending on how you want to go ahead and take a look at the status quo. And I know that some of them are variants of the organizational development proposal piece, but Kurt, I think, has been very articulate saying that, hey, he's been an organizational development consultant. He's saying, and Kurt, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't need an organizational development consultant. We need other services, and that we're taking the wrong tack. Let's take some time to go ahead and air that out, have that disagreement clarified, and have an approach towards achieving consensus. And as for us, we have no new ideas whatsoever. We are idea neutral. We just simply say, take the existing ideas that exist out there in these different proposals, juxtapose them, and try to go ahead and deal with the individual issues embedded therein one by one. And the OD consultant is one of them, probably the major one.
Thank you, Tom. Laura Steele from Washington. Go ahead, Laura. You're muted still. You're muted.
There we go. Sorry. Richard, I have a question for you first. On some of the other calls, we had time limits for discussions, but I'm noticing that there isn't one for this.
Well, the questions are directed to these people, so that's why. Why don't you direct your question to someone else and give them a chance to express their plan?
Well, my question actually is for Tom, but I also want to say, I really agree with what Joanna said. I thought that was very pertinent.
Yeah.
So Tom, Let me see your face. I'm not seeing your face yet.
Yeah, he's on.
Yeah, I'm there. Hi.
Where are you?
Say
Uh,
something, Tom, so your
I
picture
te-
will light
test-
up.
There you
Testing,
are.
testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right, great.
You're good, you're good. Okay, I just, in the beginning, when you were describing the changes in your proposal, I didn't quite follow it. Could you go through the beginning part again, particularly the part about coordinators and the AU executive team and the 11 people part?
Sure, sure. So there'd be, we want to make sure that every proposal advocate is represented, right? But we also want to make sure that non-proposal advocates are on the committee and that it's chaired by people who we respect and who we think can be fair and neutral arbiters within the
Who
process. I have a
chooses
couple of-
that?
Huh?
Who chooses them?
Who chooses it? We're saying that the AEU board would go ahead and appoint those 2 people. And that if the AEU board, for some reason, is unable to meet quickly on this, that the AEU board executives, the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer could go ahead and make the appointment, and they, they move on from there. And if you want to be formal about it, the full AEU board can go ahead and make that, that appointment. Then after that task force is set up, then yeah, go ahead and dig into the nitty gritty. You're trying to go ahead and resolve these differences that we have among these different proposals and be very specific. And I'd like to get, as one of the proposal authors, Brooklyn would like to go ahead and be represented on the committee as well. We have lots of pointed questions to try to help us get to the right consensus solution on this.
So follow-up question. What is the pool from which these people will be appointed?
So each proposal advocate would say, hey, here's who we think our representative should be to the task force. And then
The
you
non-proposal
can say,
rep. The non-proposal reps.
that would come from the AEU with the advice of the president's council, from the AEU board with the advice of the president's council.
No. What
No?
pool would they be choosing from to fill those non-proposal slots?
I don't think it's a
So-
closed group. I don't think it's meant to be a closed pool.
Yeah, that'd be up to, the AEU might very well choose to have people who are not members of the AEU board or who are not presidents, just people who are thoughtful and who are willing to go ahead and participate within this.
So would
this
there be a volunteer process? Like, oh, I want to be on that. I want to join that.
Potentially, I would go ahead and defer to the AEU board on that one as to the mechanism, but I'm betting that the AEU board executives or the AEU board as a whole could come up with a few people. But I think it wouldn't just, it doesn't make sense to just have the proposal advocates there, that you need to have a couple of people to help organize the process as chairs, and then say 3 more people so that you've got 5 people in there who are not the advocates to try to provide a better mix. Now, if they come back and say, oh, no, that's too many people on the board, or it's not enough people, I mean, we can go ahead and tweak that. We were just taking a crack at what we thought would be a fair but not unwieldy group of people.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Judy Myers from Washington. Go ahead, you're muted still.
Yep.
There you go.
I guess it's not entirely a question, but for Kurt, when you were answering Sonia's question, I got a little mixed up. Sorry, my lighting is kind of crazy here. About when the referent for we that you used, that it seemed that there were sometimes you were referring to we, your society, sometimes you were talking about we, ethical culture writ large. Sometimes we, I'm not entirely sure who it referred to. So I'm still trying to
Which
parse a
context
little bit
is that?
of.
Well, so our proposal is from the Bergen Ethical Culture Society, voted on
Right.
by the board. with all of our participation and with all of their edits. That's the proposal that we put together. So when I say we, I mean with the Bergen Society, but I'm also meaning we as a collection of we are a congregational polity, meaning your society, my society, other societies. That is the other big we that's in the room. We're focusing sometimes on the AU, which is also we also, right? We are the AU. We are also, each of us are congregations. And so what I'm saying is that we just need to make sure that each of the congregation is on firm footing, and a lot of them are not. And that's the goal of this focus is we collectively then would help each of the societies through our training collectively together. There's plenty of wisdom in this room already. There are people here who've had a lot of history, we have a lot of presidents, we have people like Tom who's has a lot of ideas on all this stuff. We the Washington Society's a healthy place. You probably, I don't know if you have a deficit or not, but you're probably doing quite well. So there's a lot of wisdom.
Not anymore.
You don't have a deficit?
All
Oh,
right.
yeah, the
Not
Brooklyn
anymore. After
Society.
selling the building, we no longer.
I
have
mean,
deficit.
I mean the Washington Society, correct? But
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
So
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
I'm sorry, Judy, if that was confusing, but it's how do we, meaning the congregational
Right.
polity of each of the societies, accomplish these goals?
Right, well, that's what I'm saying is that because the we shifted, it was a little hard for me to follow.
Yeah, I'm not really good on these really, as you can tell, fast questions that come along. I get tripped up and occasionally because my mind's racing. I apologize if sometimes I'm confusing. I wish I could slow down and have a coffee or a beer with all of y'all, but we just unfortunately don't have the time to do that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Judy. Anthony from Susquehanna Valley.
Good
Go ahead.
evening, everyone. I mean, Kurt, I would take you up on that coffee. So I'm gonna read my question very slowly, and I wrote it up to make sure that also I am following through with my thought process.
Is this directed to someone in particular, or is this
Kurt.
just on to? Okay.
Great.
Thank
Go ahead, Anthony.
So it's twofold. So I'm gonna say it very slow. So many of the societies have committed themselves to being an anti-racist organization, or as we're clarifying here, trying to practice a polity that is rooted and centered in an anti-racist practice. That means more diversity, inclusion, work towards equity, belonging, and hopefully liberation. How does the budget and future vision of the American Ethical Union moves us further towards an anti-racist work based on the budget that Bergen is proposing, especially, of course, and not invoking political ideologies, but recognizing our own positionality, and that, for example, you and many others in the positions of power are white people, and you as a white man leading this effort. And how does then power get shared?
Yeah, it's funny when we talk about intersectionality that the only thing people notice about me is that I'm white, rather than I'm a gay father raising a gay Dominican son coming from a diverse biracial family. You know, it's just, this is my son, just so people know that we have put up with my son and I, with people calling us all kinds of names because the Dominicans don't like the fact that I'm a white man raising a Dominican son. White people also want to know if I'm some kind of sugar daddy because I'm a gay father of a gay son. We put up with this all the time, all nonstop, by people judging us. No matter what we do, we get judged. We get judged walking into a restaurant. We get judged when we walk down the street. We get judged when he hugs me just because his son hugging his father. We get judged a lot. I know what all that feels like. I've gone through my entire life with that. I started on the border of Mexico, which is where I'm from, in South Texas, la frontera de Mexico, en la frontera allá, en la colonia es aquí, allá, con permiso. And I have started just fighting for the rights of immigrant children to be able to get hearing services in South Texas. We built the first homeless shelter in the modern time at the Ethical Society in Riverdale. That was me and John Benfadi at RISEC putting that together. I spent the last 20 years working in community, more so than I think a lot of people in this room who don't work in community. and various kind of communities are going out. And I'll tell you one thing that we need to do. We need to put a grant writing pen in every single person's hand, and we need to raise the money, because the right is out there kicking our butt by raising all this money, trying to take away our rights. And we, the progressive people who should be stopping this and standing this, can't even create a job training program. We can't even get out there and raise money for immigrants. We support a homeless shelter, we support an orphanage in Uganda here at the Ethical Society for 20 years. We support a food pantry in Haiti. We're one of the few societies doing all this stuff. And yet people want to look at me because of the color of my skin and don't know nothing about me or my family, and say that, and to my face, that somehow because I was born with some original sin called white skin, that I had to go through some Christianized restorative justice program to clear me of my sins so I don't have to do that anymore. It's a very insulting that people say that to us all the time. And me and my son and the people who I work with in community are tired of being called out by our race and not by who we are. We created the being white and its hidden assumption circle that is now you call the accountability circle. We just trained several of you in the AU. We've been doing this for decades. We created one of the oldest LGBTQ youth programs in the nation. I work with transgender people all the time, every day practically, working with different groups. And someone in this very movement called me transphobic. We put up with this again and again and again at the Bergen Society, the most racially abrasive organization out there. And we're raising money. I created jobs for 21 young adults this summer, all diverse. Who else is doing that? And yet people want to look at us and say, you're a white man, therefore you have some original sin, you have something that's on you. And I have to tell you, coming from a diverse family, that is so insulting, not only to me as a white person, to my Black son. There is plenty of money in there. You all need to be out there writing grants. We have to raise up the liberal voice in this country. I work with federal government all the time. So I'm a consultant for the federal government, right? They come to me and ask, how do we diversify the work program? That's why I won the Centennial Award from the Obama administration, because of the work I did with Yellowstone National Park to get them to integrate their park service. The Find Your Park program that you probably all seen the poster was me who came in and changed that and said, we need to get rid of that stupid program and create something called Mountains to Main Street to get more diverse audiences out there. This is the work I have been doing for all of my life, fighting for this. Ever since I left Texas because of homophobia and other stuff that I just, at the end of it, couldn't take it anymore. Left my food, my culture, my music, my people to move up here, to fight for these things up here. And that's what we need to get back to. Felix Adler was about that as well. He created the first international race group in the United States. We were one of the co-founders of the NAACP. We have done all of this work. And so I will continue to write grants. I will continue to create jobs. We're going to try and create wellness programs. We're going to do all these things. And I'm pouring $60,000 of grant writing money in this very 1 year that the Bergen Society did to make these changes. And all I'm asking is for other societies to stop talking about all these things and holding hands and wishing the world would change and get out there and create jobs.
Thank you, Kurt.
I'm so sorry, ladies and
I
gentlemen.
do have the follow-up, by the way. I mentioned that it was twofold. Is
Okay,
it okay
go
if I
ahead.
ask the other?
You can
Yes,
see I
go
get
ahead.
very passionate by being labeled. And I have to tell you that labeling other people, the problem with some people have nowadays is we see other people as the problem. Ethical culture was never that way in the past. We saw other people as the solution. That is our religion. Not people as problems, people as solutions. Let's go back to that. I'm sorry, Anthony, to cut you off.
No, no problem. Thank you for your passion. So in my experience, I've been to multiple graduate schools and institutions. And so I've gone through processes of merger specifically. So this is what's rooting the question. So clarifying between the Bergen Society and the American Ethical Union and some of the processes, if this scenario were to be approved, would it be accurate to say that potentially there is a merger of the AU merging with the Bergen Society, meaning that then $250,000 would be coming into this potentially new iteration? If so, for example, would the Bergen Society change its name? Given that it would basically be becoming a new institution, and how would that then be representative of all the other societies?
No, we have no idea that you're going to become the Bergen Society. We believe that each of you exist in your own ecological niche, shall we call it. I'm not a humanist, I'm a biocentrist. Each of you in your own area have your own people, your own organizations, your own programs. The idea is to strengthen that, because some of the societies don't have a leader. They can't
I think
afford.
the
they can't
question was,
afford
I
those
think the
things.
question had to do with the AEU, because AEU has bank accounts.
The
And-
AU's
and
bank account, that's
So the
their.
question is, the organizational structure of the AEU, what happens to that with this plan?
No, it still exists. There's still an AU, there's still a board, there's still the YES conferences, there's still the assemblies. All of that continues to exist. Everything that's existing now within that, it would continue to exist. The only thing we're saying that we don't need, there's no reason, we don't need an executive director for the next 3 years. That can be run by the board, as it had for the first 75 years of our movement. And that could just be run by the board. And second of all, that we don't need some outside consultants, because we have enough expertise already existing in the room. My society, trust me, I got to focus on our society. We got things to do here as well as y'all. But if we all got together and we all just learn from one another of the types of trainings that we can provide, we got to strengthen that. But right now we have several societies about to close their doors. Several
All right,
societies about to close their doors.
Got that. Yeah, so let's move on. Hank has a question, and then Abby, and then Contra. So Hank, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, and, all right. The statement was made that the regeneration proposal does not answer any of the questions. It looks at each area and says how to regenerate it. But part of the motion is a budget that has no position for the former RE consultant, is only feasible if we close the AU office, and has no provision for continuing for continuing leader in training grants if any of the current leaders in training are not completed their program. None of the other proposals have a budget embedded in them. And would the Silicon Valley be willing to to end their motion without including the budget, so that these questions could be decided based on the work of the OD consultants?
Does anyone want to respond to that?
Our budget has continues to also have money in there to run all the existing programs. We only have one leader in training currently right now, and there's plenty of money existing funds for doing that. We also have other sources of funding to keep a lot of the existing programs going. We do need to, I would rather pay your societies, if I were king of the world, have your societies handle the mail and those kinds of stuff and make some more income for y'all. So I think, we would just consolidate, but that's in the Bergen proposal budget.
Hank, I just want to say that in the Susquehanna Valley regeneration plan, there is money carryover to pay for the leader in training. I don't know if that's not clear, but there is money for that. And what was your other question about the budget?
Well, the Susquehanna proposal motion includes the budget.
Right.
And the budget has $10,000 for certain types of administration things that would mean that the AU office would have to be closed immediately at the beginning of the year that how you would handle the website and there are things in software, etc., that had $15,000 more last year or this year than the $10,000. And so whether that budget could be decided separately from the basic proposal, because the budget makes certain decisions, like firing or not continuing to have an RE advisor.
I think that, any board sometimes has to make budget modifications. I don't think that, I think that will be done when there needs to be, and there is money in the budget for that. There's leeway between the income and the expense. There's less expense than there is income. So there's some flexibility.
Right.
But the motion includes the budget.
Yeah.
And
Yes, it does.
Correct, of course.
whereas I think the other motions have not embedded in them the budget.
I guess the question is, in the future governance of the AU over the course of the year, is there flexibility? Is there room for flexibility? Is there money that may be available or money that just won't be there by reason of the dynamics of the program? And decisions then will have been foreclosed. I think that's what Hank's asking.
There's definitely flexibility, and there's also money that, we're being very conservative. There probably will be some unrestricted donations that will come in. There will be other money that will be there, but we wanted to be very conservative and only account for the apportionment and the drawdown on the investment. So yes, there is room for modifications, the way any board would need to do to look at a budget along the way and manage properly.
Thank you, Rachel, for taking on the budget. That is not my forte, and so, yes, thank you.
Okay,
Um,
next. Oh,
Can
we
I
done?
add something, Richard? Just a moment. I think what Hank is saying is that the budget is part of the vote in Susquehanna's. But I believe that that is also the case in Bergen's. The budget is part of the vote. So I think that's what Hank was alluding to.
Well, I guess it's like any budget that the assembly would approve. I mean, that's what we go forward on. And what Rachel is saying is, as in any budget, there are adjustments that can be made along the way by the board by shifting things around or finding new revenues.
But the budget does not have the funds to pay the rent for the building, for the office. The budget does not have funds for an ethical education advisor. So at the start of the year, these decisions would go into effect.
Mhm. Right. So the danger being that they would be foreclosed options as years go on.
Yeah, now,
Thank you,
Can
Hank.
can I just say, something about the education, we are talking about having teams. And one of the teams would be and could be an education team. And those will consist of members throughout the movement who have experience in the EE ethical education, and hopefully getting in young folks, young students. And they're going to spend the first few months evaluating themselves and consulting with other societies to develop a future plan to create more robust ethical education for the future. So it's not like any of these things are just suddenly disappearing. You know, this is the year that is going to be spent, you know, coming together and sharing ideas and building, you know, stronger sense of community. So.
Well, I think what Hank is saying
Yeah.
that, you know, the office will be lost if the rent's
Yeah,
not
but
paid.
is the office functioning? I mean, what does the office function now?
Well, that's a
I'm not
decision that would
sure.
be made,
Yeah, I mean,
basically. That would be an
I
option that
think
would
that-
be made.
Yeah,
at
I
the
think that's
beginning.
gonna be
Okay,
up to the board. Yeah, really.
right.
Big
Okay,
board. Mhm.
Abby and then Contra and Omawali. So Abby, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. This is not a question. It's actually a comment. I agree with Patty that having a outside consultant makes sense. However, I also like the Bergen plan's focus on building up the societies. And that the problem I have with the Bergen plan, well, one of the problems I have, and particularly Kurt, with your last set of comments, was that the idea that we have the expert, speaking as one who is I'm on the board at West, I'm an active volunteer, but speaking as one who does that and who is trying to make it work, at the height of the Washington Society's activity, we had an entire cadre of families who were single earner families. And those families no longer exist in the Washington, DC area. And so the total number, not expertise, the expertise is there, but the total number of volunteer hours and energy is gone. So while household incomes haven't necessarily gone down, leisure hours have gone down. And so is my experience personally. And so I think it feels to me like an unreasonable demand to expect this to be volunteer-led. And therefore, I feel pretty strongly that I feel that it's important to have an outside eye. In addition, as was described or talked about in a previous meeting, we have a level of conflict and inability to come to consensus that has been demonstrated this year pretty thoroughly, such that I don't think that the Brooklyn plan will actually work. It's a lovely vision. I love the idea of consensus. I just don't think it's going to work. And for that reason, and honoring, you know, the piece from the Bergen plan of supporting societies rather than supporting a central office, that's what leaves me in support of the reform proposal, because it combines all of those elements. That's one of the two West proposals. So that is my personal preference, and the reasons why I think that's the plan with the most likelihood of succeeding.
Can you say a little bit more about the reform plan? Like what elements are in there
Yeah,
that
so-
achieve what you're talking about?
Yes, thanks, Richard. And others who are familiar with it, I hope you'll jump in as well. So to keep essential elements of the services the AEU now performs, such as officiant and leader certification going, there is a grant to one society. For the support of ethical education, there's a grant to another society. For the support of developing our grant writing capabilities, the Central AEU would provide a grant to the Bergen Society. And these societies, it is true that it is not ideal to farm them out. There are problems with that also, but the choice of where to farm them out is where there is current expertise and leadership in that. And so to do that in each of these areas, and there's one more that I've forgotten, but in each of these areas, the grant allows the continuation of expertise and leadership that is already happening to continue at the societies that already have it. So that supports the societies and also keeps some of those fundamental functions that the AEU does now provide going. The board of the ethical society of the AEU, their main responsibility would be reimagining the organization. So they would not be trying to run various programs. They would not be trying to, and because of that, it makes a serious try at exactly what the regeneration proposal is trying to get at, which is to step back and give ourselves space to work on revisioning what we can do going forward realistically. And then there was one more element that I am losing the thread of exactly how it's reflected.
I didn't get the idea. Great. Thank you, Abby. Thank you for expanding on that. Chandra from Baltimore. Go ahead.
Thanks. So, Kurt, I want to get back to Anthony's question because I don't think that you actually answered it, because it was more in relation to, yes, we all hold multiple identities, right? And, you know, there's no denying you hold identity as a white man, but I think the question really comes down to, from your like budgeting and organizational perspective with this focus on writing grants, how does that, for societies that are trying to focus on being more inclusive. I'm sorry, there's feedback on my end.
Contra, hold on a second. I think we're losing Kurt. I think we lost Kurt, but I think he.
Oh, he's there.
Is
No,
he
he's
back?
on his cell phone. He's there. He's there. He's
There.
just switched his audio on.
Back, Kurt, are you with us? Come in, Kurt. Oh, it's connected to audio. Here he.
Audio is connecting.
All right, maybe we just hold that for a minute, and can we go to Omawali? Do you have a question that's not for Kurt?
Muted.
Muted.
Look, Chandra, you had finished?
No, we're waiting for. Oh,
Dropped off, so I guess I'm not.
Oh,
gonna
it's the same. It would be.
oh,
yes.
here's Kurt.
It's here.
Kurt, you back with us?
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
there's something wrong with my computer.
Yeah,
Go
right.
ahead.
Well, Contra had a question for you, so we're looking
Okay.
forward to you. Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
There we go.
Yeah, so it was more about like positionality, right? So for societies, and I think you've said many times, like, you know, societies are shutting down. If there's a commitment to being anti-racist, inclusive organizations, right? So trying to accommodate people from all different identities and backgrounds. From a budget and organizational perspective, like what is the vision in your plan for helping societies to bring that particular vision, that, you know, being more inclusive? Because I mean, if we're honest, right, this is a mostly white and older organization, right? That is the makeup of the societies. So how do you operationalize that? I mean, you talked a lot about jobs programs, but what I think Anthony and I are talking about is like actual diverse membership within our societies.
Well, there's a couple of things about that. The question I guess we have to eventually explore is what do we mean by membership going forth in new congregations, because that term is rapidly changing, and it's a better question to ask is whom do you serve? Our congregation is only 13% overall diverse, which is lower, you know, to be considered diverse congregation in the United States, you're supposed to be around 20%, which is ridiculously low. But I also know that I'm more racially diverse than the Korean Presbyterian Church across the street, the AME Zion Street, a block, 10 blocks away, and the large mosque that's near us. So we're trying to, of course, be as inclusive and diverse as possible. Our Sunday school programming is 44% diverse, right? So we have two services on Sunday. Our first service, our morning service, is 44% diverse, and our youth teen program is about 80 to 90% diverse. I think what we have to do is to say, how can we create all these programs? And it's not just job training that we offer. We also STEM enrichment programs. So we have a curriculum here we're writing about called ESTEAM. We work with the local BCLA, the Bergen County Lesbian Gay Alliance. I partner with them and help create programs almost all of their youth are diverse. That is the future. I totally agree with us that we are not reflective of the diversity of the nation. And part of that is that we're no longer relevant in people's lives as we were back in the when Adler got started and was creating places for people to live and visiting nurse programs and job training programs of vocational schools. What I'm asking for us is to return to that a vision of service type of thing. And that's how we bring in so many people here. We had 312 visitors in the society last year. And we are serving a larger and broader group of people that are coming in more and more. That's why we've kept our Spanish language program running for such a long period of time.
All right, we have
So
15 minutes left, so we're gonna have to.
I'm sorry. So the question is what you have to do is you cannot serve people. And I work in community for decades, and I'll tell you this little thing. You can promise to be as inclusive and open to everyone else, but if you're not relevant to people, they're not going to come in the door. And you're relevant by meeting people where they are, not where you want them to be. What do they need? They need jobs, they need wellness, they need health issues, they need affordable housing. Those are the things that we can be tackling. That's the things we've been tackling here at the Bergen Society. And that's what we're hoping to show other societies how to do. And I can show you how to raise money to fund all that. I would love to work in Baltimore and Philadelphia. I have connections in Washington, D.C. Those are places that I've worked extensively, living in Virginia there for so long as well and working with the federal government. We can do this if we have funding. We need money to be able to be relevant into other people's lives. Otherwise, we're just giving them, yes, we like you. And what do we do with that? I'll tell you, like I said, with my son and I, when we walk down the street, we will always be judged by people who don't think we're the right fit. And so you're always going to have people who are going to look at you no matter what you do. But I'll tell you right now, come with me tomorrow morning and come out and look at the 20 young people who are working underneath me for the next 5 weeks, making $4,200 during the summer. And I'll show you what is possible within an ethical society.
All righty, we have about 4 more questions. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Chandra. Omawali?
Yes,
Baltimore.
I really don't have a question, but I have some support statements here to make. I'm sorry that I joined late because tonight is my son's his 17th birthday and had to, to do some fatherly duties.
Happy birthday to him.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, yeah.
I want to say, Kurt, that, I really appreciate your sharing of your personal story and really admire your courage to do that. One of the things I've been working in anti-racism, white supremacy for nearly 20 years. And I always tell people not to take these things personally, that it is really about role. And if you could understand role, then you can understand why white supremacy becomes a problem within the ethical culture. And therefore we have to address it because role is really something that is very unconscious and how it appears, so that intentionally you want to be this, but sometimes the role, the representation of the role has a history. And the history of how that role appears could be oppressive to others when your intention is really different. And I think this is really the issue that is really here, being tonight. Now, I want to say that, grant writing is a real special skill. I took a course in it. I don't think I was good at it because I didn't have persistence in pursuing it, the organization to pursue it. It's a skill that I think that can be taught, right? So that if that is a need. But what I think is the underlying issue for ethical culture and AEU is that because we've had so much dysfunction, it constrains capacity building. When you remove the dysfunction in the system, what you do is that you unleash a great deal of creativity. So that the societies, when we do that, all kind of possibilities will start to appear, right? All sets of new capabilities would meet, and in the terms of people and their interests. Now you could, the Salvation Army started by opening a soup kitchen. It appears that people's need, they're hungry and they can get some food, right? And when they got the food, then they were able to listen to Christianity. Well, we can open soup kitchens if that's what we need, figuratively. But I think what we really need is empowering folks, right? And so that we could address the larger social system that create these conditions. You understand what I'm saying? So
That's correct, exactly.
right. So I think that the ethical societies, especially mine, right? My society, the BES society, and that's my home base. Now we need to be addressing these larger issues. So I told them recently, the mayor of Baltimore should be able to know who BES is and come to BES for advice around policy, right? This is addressing larger social system rather than handing out largesse or paternalism. And we have to be able to sit back and listen to that. If we say that we want to continue AEU as it used to be all these years ago and stuff, well, it's an inclusive club. I mean, an exclusive club, not an inclusive club. So is that what you want to do? Right?
Do you want a response from Kurt, or because we have a few more people who want to also get their ideas in?
Okay, so what I'm saying is that the idea of the teams from the regeneration proposal, the idea of teams will identify those areas of needs, because some people say we don't need an outside consultant. Well, the teams are inside consultancy in things that it carries a kind of resource that can address the emerging problems to issues. So I see no need for I don't see the need for the other systems, because to my mind, the regeneration with the teams is a very revolutionary proposal to make resources available and not have unintended a very heavily resourced organization dictating what should be done. So that's my input.
Right. Thank you very much. Well, do you want to respond to that, Kurt? We have a couple of other questions.
I just want to say that, that the work I do as a social activist working with diverse populations my entire life is one of the things I frequently hear is we want self-determination. We want to be able to control our own lives, our own destinies, and we want our own empowerment to do that. I think creating career pipelines is a necessary thing to do. That's what I've done for 240 young adults every single summer for the last 15 years. And I'd like for y'all to come tomorrow to the work site. See the 3 African young ladies I have right now that I put in hard hats, power tools, and working out there on the bridge. And afterwards they come up to me and said, "We can do it." I said, "You certainly can. You don't need me. Nobody needs me. They don't need any other saviors, all that kind of stuff. We don't need anybody to tell us how to live. People should be able to choose their own lives, their own self-determination, and we just need to create a pathway and a bridge to make that happen." And that's what you have to have money for. If you don't have money, you're not relevant to the lives of other people.
All righty, John, you only have just a few minutes left, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll be succinct. I had a question for Patty and perhaps for Rachel. And I have a brief follow-up after this primary question. So Wes has a proposal for the reform of the AU that entails a pause in AU operations, reflective of my attraction to the sabbatical idea that Rachel advocated for back in the springtime. I was wondering if you could describe why you all would like to amend the regeneration plan to remove such a pause.
Patty, you're muted.
Patty, you want to answer? You're muted. Go ahead.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. So this is more of the opportunity to reprioritize. You know, when you think of pausing, everyone was thinking, "Oh, we're shutting down, nothing's happening." But it's very clear that things are still happening during this year of regeneration. Okay, we're reprioritizing programs. We're training, committee meetings are going on during this period. So that is why the word pause was taken out of our scenario and put in reprioritizing. We're not sleeping. We're not taking a vacation.
Understood. Unless Rachel wanted to say something, could I ask a quick
Go
follow-up?
ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, John.
So, looking at the adjustments or the continuation of the budgets that's there, there does seem to be quite a bit happening, and it's being done by the AU, not being farmed out, et cetera, not being paused. So I was wondering how you would imagine that we can pull that off without having an executive director. We don't have Al, we don't have Bart, we won't have an executive director. How do you imagine that the AU central office can keep all this going without an ED?
Because there isn't a lot going on with regard to the normal processes of what the AU has done. All the work is being done in teams and by the OD, and there is money for a staff person. We already have a bookkeeper, so I'm not really sure what else you're talking about. And just like Patty said, we always use the word sabbatical, and people really didn't like that word, and I hope we never repeat it. But it was always misunderstood from the very first day that it was mentioned. It was always misunderstood because no matter what I said, people did not listen and understand that. And as I said, there's a lot of work that's going to happen. So we decided to be smart and give you a different word, and hopefully you like that word better.
Thank you.
More evocative. Sonia. From
Sure.
Washington.
I actually had the same question that John just asked, so I'm going to comment on it instead. I thought that the most attractive thing about the regeneration proposal was, in fact, the sabbatical. Because in my view, and it's just my personal opinion, in my view, the American Ethical Union is toxic. I believe that the American Ethical Union does its absolute best to chew people up and spit them out. If you look at the young people who left the board after the last board year, even though they didn't have to, right? Their time was not up. I personally seriously considered resigning from the board more than once last year. There are wonderful volunteers like Katie LeClaire who just couldn't take it anymore. And I think that I think that one of the great benefits of the idea of pausing, no matter what scenario you choose, that includes that concept, that includes the concept of not continuing with business as usual, is that it breaks that system and hopefully gets us to a place where we can rebuild something better.
Sonia, I just want to say the pause is still there. We're just using a different word. And frankly, the pause won't do it. That's what everyone misses. You need new leadership with different ideas and diversity to end the toxicity and the dysfunction.
Here.
Well, I just want to say there were halcyon days. I mean, there was a time when the AU was not described this way. It wasn't experienced this way. But I think the shock to the system of the last 4 years or so was really a terrible body blow that we're still reverberating from. And all the people who are not getting along on the board are each individual wonderful people who have ethical culture in mind, yet the benefits of ethical culture, the value of ethical culture, yet nevertheless, have gone into a kind of a whirligig of distress. So is it a pause that's going to be the change, or is it a bigger board by putting 25 people on the board like the Bergen plan provides, which would change the dynamic? In some ways, a lot of the proposals still provide the same continuity with the board making the decision and is relying on the same group. So what is it that's going to create that break? What is going to create that systemic shift? I think that's our challenge, to identify what that is. Well, it's 9:30 now. Tom has his hand up. Can you make it short, Tom?
Well, I can make the question short. I know about the answer. So it's a question about racial justice and how we go ahead and proceed the recommended changes to the AEU. So we've got the confluence of two major occurrences moving forward right now. We have the possible election of the slate, which would be the first in the history of the 147-year history of the AEU that persons of color may be achieving the positions of power and influence within the AEU. But at the same time, we have various proposals that are talking about disempowering the AEU, farming services out to other societies, reducing the budget, talking about different roles of the executives versus the rest of the board. So for folks who are interested in the racial justice aspect of this, my question is whether we should treat this confluence of events as a coincidence, and also whether we should be taking a look at the different proposals from a racial justice lens. So is it a coincidence or is it not? And how do we look at all this?
I think that's a question we should take with us and we should ponder, because that would be another workshop in itself. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here and raising all these important issues for this organization
you.
that we all love so much.
Same time.
Carolyn, do you have
Yeah.
some announcements to make?
Same time, same